Boker Tov, today's daf and Chodesh Tov. Today's daf is daf Chof Aleph in Makos. Today is the second day of Rosh Chodesh, the first day of Iyar. We learned for the Aliyah Neshama of my father-in-law, Reb Chaim Baruch Ben Yisrael, whose yard site is today, and of course we learned for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael Hanasun Batzar V'Shivya. This is where we're up to the Mishnah, the first Mishnah on Chof Aleph Amud Aleph. If you write a tattoo, we'll talk about the lashon of ketovet ka'aka. You're writing and the tattoo, the engravement. If you write a tattoo, you're chayav malchus for that. Let's say he just wrote it on his skin, but he didn't engrave it. He didn't dig in like with a knife or an instrument. Or or he engraved. He made a like a cut in his skin. But he didn't write in it. He's not chayav. He has to write and kakeh. So Rashi learns that it's speaking that the pashup shot here is that you first write like you use ink. It says the Mishnah says v'kakeh. B'dio is not the other. The gear says b'dio v'chol davar shiroshem. In other words, he's not chayav unless he makes an engraving in his skin. That's how they do it in engraving. And also he's got to use like ink or some sort of a pigment, something that's lasting. So that's the idea here. If you just color on your hand, that's not a tattoo. A tattoo means, according to Rashi, they first used to use this ink, let's say ink or some liquid, some sort of a substance that writes, and vitriol or something like that. Kohl is like like a bluish pigment. They would write with that, and then they would cut the skin so that it would sink in and stay there permanently. But as others learned that it's the other way around, because it just says ksovas kaka. You write it and then you engrave it, but it's the same thing. The way it's done normally is that you first cut it open and then they put the ink in. Today they have different methods, but the point is, if it's a permanent tattoo, then you get malchus for this. Also, Shimon Yerom Shimon and shicht of shame. Shicht of sham es Hashem, unless you write there the shame. Now, what do you mean the shame? Rav Shimon says it's not. You can't just if you just write. People make all kinds of markings or colorings or pictures. That's not chayiv according to Shimon. According to Shimon, in the Shimon Yudah, the name of Rav Shimon, you have to write a name in there. What name is that? It sounds like Hashem. Hashem Shneimar Uksovas Kaka Liyidu B'Chem Ani Hashem. So he says based on this pasuk, we'll see what that means. Does he really mean? The Gemara is going to ask. Does it mean to say you have to write Hashem's name in there? Only then are you chayiv for writing a tattoo or not? So the Gemara says right away. Ani Hashem mamish. Is that what you have to write, or the Shem Hashem mamish? The gears in the Bach is Achichtov Pirshayel Sholo Im Kachu. Because he says Reb Shimon Yudah said name Reb Shimon. You're not chayiv unless you write Ani Hashem. Because it says Ksovas Kakali Ani Hashem. Then as you have to write the words Ani Hashem in order for you to b'chayv a tattoo. If you write anything else, write God bless America or my mother, what? Mother, whatever they write in there, you're not chayv according to Shem Yir. So he says, do you mean the words Ani Hashem mamash or malay lo? Kedatan Rav Kaf doesn't mean that. Remember, means you're only chayiv on a tattoo if you write the name of an idol. Shenemar uksovas kakalo titnu b'chem Ani Hashem. What does that mean? Ani Hashem v'lo acher. Only me, nobody else. So if you write a tattoo with the name of an idol on there, then you are chayiv. That's from Shimon's opinion, but we don't hold that way. We all like the Tanakama that any permanent tattoo, you're chayiv malchus for, of course, if you're warned. Amar Malkia Amar Vada Barava says like this. We used to be that as a remedy for a wound, they would treat the wound by using a powder made from burnt wood ash, Afer Makla. They would powder the wound with that to heal it. You shouldn't use that kind of thing. Why? Because that kind of burnt wood ash, not just any dirt you can put on there, but burnt wood ash, when you put that on the wound, it looks like a tattoo. So it's Marasayan, says Rashi. It looks like Marasayan. The Gemara says that, because it looks like that. It looks like Marasayan. I mean, it appears that it looks like a tattoo, and you shouldn't do that. People shouldn't suspect you of putting a tattoo on your hand. That's the first. That's what Rav Malkia said. Right, next time. Now, before we there's another opinion we'll see that there's no problem in there. Why? Because it's obviously because if it's a wound, it's not because you're doing it because you're making a tattoo. But before we get there, we bring down the Gemara, which says we have this Gemara in several places. The author of this member that we just said that you shouldn't use a wood ash, a burnt wood ash on your skin because it looks like a tattoo. Was who? Who was the author of that? So we start by saying over of Malkiyah with an aleph at the end, Malkiyah. So Rav Nachman says like this, some Rav Nachman or some say Rav Chanina, Braid Rav Hika, Shvot Shvachas V'Gumas. There are three halachas in Shas that were said by Rav Malkiyah because it's confusing. Malkiyah and Malkiyah get confused. So he says the three halachas that were said about Shvod, Shvachas and Gumas, what are they? Shvod means if you use a spit for cooking on Yantif, afterwards it's muksa. Once you finished using it, it's muksa. Number two, that a woman should always be busy with something, even if she was wealthy, came from a wealthy home, and brought 100 maids with her into the marriage. She should still sew or do some work with wool because idleness breeds. That it's demoralizing. She'll become like, a little crazy. It's, to do nothing all day. She's got to be occupied with something. And gumos, we know you have to have 2 pubic hairs, let's say, to show that you're past puberty, that you're an adult. So he said there that even if you have the follicles, even if the hairs aren't there, but the follicles from which the hair grow, that's good enough. So these 3 halachas were said by Rav Malkiyah. 3 other halachas, bluris, that if you're giving a haircut to a Oved Avodah Zarah, and he's got one of those chups in the middle of his head, like a ponytail, a bluris, whatever that haircut was, keep away from it because it's really like a sign of Avodah Zarah. Keep your hands away. And Efer Makla, this halacha, that's why it's brought down here, because our halacha here of Efer Makla, don't put burnt wood ash on your skin to heal it because it looks like a tattoo. Gvina, and the rules of Gvina. Gvina, technically, Gvina Sakum isn't really, they could tell that the cheese is made by Goyim are not necessarily not kosher, unless, of course, it was made from a non-kosher animal, but basically it's kosher. The problem is that they smear the cover with lard, so you can't eat it. So he says those 3 halachas are blurs and Ephraimako were said by Rav Malkiyah. So Rav Nachman or Rav Chanina says the first 3 halachas that he mentioned were said by Malkiyah. The last 3 were said by Malkiyah. Rav Papa disagrees. He says no. Masisa, if it was from a Mishnah or a Brisa, which is more authoritative, it was said by Rav Malkiyah. Now, don't divide it the way Rav Nachman divided it, but rather if it was a Brisa or a Mishnah, it was based on that. Rav Malkiyah said it based on a Brisa or a Mishnah that was Rav Malkiyah. Shmaitz, if it was just a regular teaching, a regular halacha that wasn't in a Mishnah or Brisa, that was Rav Malkiyah. The Siman, you remember it is Masnisa Malkasa, like Rav Malkiyah has an aleph at the end, so it's either because it's more female, and that's like Masnisa, like a Brisa, or because Malkiyah is like a king. Malkiyah sounds like a king, and Masnisa is also more authoritative. Masnisa's Malchasa is like the king, like Malkiyah. And the other ones were said by Malkiyah. Mabina, what's the difference? Ikemenayu shvachos. So according to where Rashi's first shot is that the only difference is that shvachos, which was said, the rule about even if you have 100 maids, you must do some work so that you shouldn't go crazy. Well, instead of Rav Malkiyah, that goes to Rav Malkiyah. So according to this, instead of Rav Malkiyah, it goes to Rav Malkiyah because that's Mishnah or Mishnah or Brisa. So he would have 4, and Rav Malkiyah would only be left with the 2, Shvod and Gumas. Rashi brings down another shot that he switches Shvachos with Efer Makla. So Efer Makla, which was said by Rav Malkiyah in our Gemara was said by Rav Malkiyah rather, that would go to Rav Malkiyah in place of Shvachos. They traded Shvachos and Makla according to Rav Papa. All right, that's just who the authors of those memoirs were and how to learn that. But back to the basic halacha that he said that Rav Malkiyah quoted, and at least according to the first shot, Rav Malkiyah quotes it even at the end. According to the second shot in Rashi, he switches that with Malkiyah at the end. But in any case, that halacha that you shouldn't put burnt wood ash on your skin as a powder as a healing power, you shouldn't do that because it looks like a tattoo. Rabbi Barabai Kaparafilo Rivda the Kusila. He said even on the cupper, the guy lets blood when he puts a mark there to know where he's doing it from. Or cupping could also be, like bankus, whatever healing method they use there. When they would score that on the skin, and they would make like a little mark there, it would basically, let some blood out there. There would be a bruise on the skin. Even there, where it's clear that it's doing it for medicinal purposes, you still shouldn't put the burnt wood ash on that because it looks like a tattoo. But Rav Ashi disagrees, and here's apparently the Rambam. Rav Ashi Amar Kol Makom Sheish Shamak Hamakasim Chichalab. You don't have to be concerned that it's Marasai. People think that you made a tattoo if you use burnt wood ash, because if it's clear that it's for a wound, the guy's got bandages on it, etc., and you put some on there, then it's clear that it wasn't for a tattoo. Usually you could tell if it's for a tattoo or not. Nazir she'esosa yain kol hayom. This is the halacha that Avram, you asked about before we started the Shiur. A Nazir was drinking wine all day. Now, a Nazir is forbidden for three things. What? Can't drink wine products. He can't be metame lames, and he can't shave, can't get a haircut or shave. So Nazir is just, let's say he was drinking wine all day in a chayv halachas. They told him once, don't drink, but he kept drinking all day, and that obviously you can only drink, you can only drink in consecutive times. You can't drink it simultaneously. You only have one mouth. So he's only chayv once. Amarlov, they told him al tishta. They warned him each time, and then he kept drinking. Then he's chayv and yibusho, so he continued to drink. Chayv will call his chayv on each and every one. That's the basic idea that we mentioned this also yesterday. That idea that that you're chayiv on each and every one if he was warned each time. He's only warned once. He's only chayiv once, no matter how many times he drank. Similar thing. Let's say he went from funeral to funeral all day, and chayiv alachas. If they told him if they warned him on each time, of course, here we're talking about malchus. You get malchus for these things. That's what this whole parak is about. You get malchus each and every time. Let's say he was shaving all day, and he's only chayiv once. They told him don't shave. Each time they told him don't shave, he continued to shave. Immediately thereafter, remember the hasra has to be immediately before the act, and he has to acknowledge it. All the rules that we said about giving a warning and acknowledging it, or he can even give a warning to himself, whatever it was. All those rules, if he was warned several times, and he's chayiv in each and every time. This refers to a nazir. Yeah.
Still a nazir. If he starts drinking wine,
he's still a nazir. Still a nazir. It's like if you're fasting, right? Sometimes you're fasting, whatever the fast was, but sometimes you have to eat for medical reasons. You have to fast. Doesn't mean you sit down and have a whole meal. You still have the fast upon you. You just do the minimum, whatever you need to get by.
No, but the definition of nazir.
He's still a nazir. Still a nazir. The problem is if he's over and it becomes tamei lames, then he has to start all over again, right? Now he's still a nazir. Now he has to bring karbanos, etc., and he has to start all over again, like we learned in nazir. Yeah. So, let's say, and as if he drinks wine, he doesn't start all over again. If he's matame lames, then he has to get purified and start all over again. But if he shaves or if he drinks wine, he's just over, but he doesn't have to start all over again. Right? Yeah, let's say, now this is not talking about a nazir. This is in general, person's wearing klein. He doesn't know, call it, and he's wearing it all day. He's only chayv once. They told him not to, and he wore it all day. That's his chayv once. Amrlov, they told him al tibashab, don't wear it. Every time they told him don't wear it, he kept wearing it. Vu poshe for he kept taking it off and putting it on. We'll see if the Gemara means literally, do you have to take it off, or just the time required for taking it off? They told him don't wear, and he kept putting it on. He's chayiv for each and every one. So he's chayiv for each and every one. If every time they warned him, he put it on, or the equivalent of putting it on, then he's chayiv in each and every one. So that's a case. So these are cases where you're chayiv several malchuses, right? Like if they told him each time they're chayiv is chayiv. Yesh Shapir's famous case in a Mishnah. We have the Pesachim also. By the way, notice this. I don't know if anybody else said late, but. Let's first finish the mission, and I'll say what I want to say. Yesh Shlomo said sometimes you can plow one furrow. You chayiv 8 lavin. 8 lavin says you get malchus 8 times on one thing. Of course, if he's warned for each one, don't do this, or you're going to get 8 malchuses, and I'm going to enumerate what they are. Now, how can you do that? Hachorish b'shor v'chamor. Number 1, he plows with a shor and a chamor. What is that? Climb. L'sachorish b'shor v'chamor yachdav. Rashi goes into our arichas over here about, doesn't have to be a chamor, it could be any 2 animals. But what are the 2 isurim here? So you have a choresh, you have a choresh b'shor v'chamor. That's one isur. You plowed with 2 different animals, right? 2 different species. The hein mukdashim. So and they are both belonging to hekdesh. So what are you chayiv for here? You're chayiv for a shore. The shore that we're talking about is a bechor shore. Bechor shorecha. You're chayiv for lo savad bechor shorecha. It's hektish. It's kedushas haguf. The chamor he's talking about is a chamor that with bedek abayis, right? You give him bedek abayis, and there you're chayiv for meila. You're chayiv for moil behektish. Bedek abayis. You're chayiv for. Rashi goes into the whole arichas over here that there's no meila on the bechor because the bechor is kachim kachim. It's kachim kalam. Kachim kalam. You're only moil on sacrilege. You're only chayiv after zrikas adam. Otherwise, it's like mom and balam. Kachim like mincha. Asham, Chatas, or Ola, that's Kachim, your mole even before. Your mole because it doesn't belong to you. So he goes to the whole Richt, so I'll explain this whole thing. But the upshot of it is that, I mean, in my view, we had a couple of days ago in Rashi, I think it was on Shabbos, that Rashi said that Rabbeinu died. It was brought down, Rabbeinu Gufo Tor, V'yatzin Shmos Batar, Lo Pir Shiosim Mikam Be'elach, Lashon Talmid. In other words, it seems to be like the rest of the Masechet from Yud Tes on, is one of his Talmidim, Lashon Talmid Rabbi Yehuda Rav Nassim. And I think it's evidence for this because Rashi seems to be very verbose and he goes off on a tangent. The same Mishnah is brought down in the Gemara in Pesachim, and there Rashi explains it succinctly that, the first thing, we said there's 8 things. Acharish b'shav v'chamor, that's climb, right? Mukdashin is like I said before, one for Bechor, because it's kadshe, it's kedushas haguf, and lo savad Bechor sharecha. And for the Chamor, it's bedek abayis. You're chayiv meila there, not for working with an animal, but you're chayiv for yet hanoah. So you have 3 things so far, right? Klayim of the animals, and the bechor shore is lo savit. You're not allowed to work with them, and the chamor you're over from meila. Uklai kerem, and when you plowed on the field, you had klayim in there, different species of seeds. Okay, but is that zoreh? Is that planting? You're plowing over here. Why? What's the issur there? The issur is planting 2 different seeds together. Gemara will talk about that. But that's number 4, Klai Kem. Number 5, Shvius. It happens to be in Shemitah. You're not allowed to work the field. That's the 5th issur. V'yontif, it's on Yontif. That's the 6th issur. You plowed the field with these 2 different animals who belong to Hegdish, and there was climb in the field, and it's on Shvius, and it's Yontif. V'koin v'nosir. And where you're plowing is in a cemetery, not a cemetery like we have today where it's all closed off. Nobody's plowing in a cemetery. Could be they are plowing. Maybe they're plowing up the land to make it easy to plant, to bury more people there. But the point is, and he's a Kohen and he's a Nazir. Kohen can't be in a Beis Kfaros, nor can a Nazir. So here, when you plowed in the cemetery on Yontif, and there's Klayim there, and it's Shvius, and it's Yontif, right? You did 8 different Isurim. Chananya ben Chachinai Omer, Afalavish Klayim. Also, you could have a 9th one. Maybe he was wearing Klayim because while he was doing it. Amulo, they said, Amulo, Eino Hashem. That's not for the same reason. We're talking about you plowed. You plowed. For the plowing, you did 8 things. This isn't plowing. This is because you put on Klayim. You could have done many different things from that day. The wearing of the Klayim has nothing to do with the plowing. He told them, Nazir also has nothing to do with the plowing. But here's the point. The answer to that is that he was plowing in a basic forest. And if he's a Nazir, there's no way to plow unless he's no way to plow except by going into the basic forest. So he had to be into the basic forest in order to plow. He had to plow. The plowing was done in the basic forest. There's no way for him to plow in the basic forest without entering it. So the Kohen Nazir is part of the Isurim. So these are 8 different Isurim that he'd be Chayav Malchus for. If he was warned, he'd get 8 Malchus 8 times. Maybe they wouldn't do it all at one sitting, but they'd be Chayav Malchus 8 times. Okay, so those are the Isurim. Omar Rabbi Ben Yossi. Poshet for Lovesh. When it says over here, Omar Rabbi Yossi, Poshet for Lovesh Mamish, does it really mean that you say over here, if he takes it off, he was warned each time, don't wear the climb. That's what we're talking about over here, right? Talking about don't wearing the climb, or the gear says Umrah Bibi Umrah Asi low posh doesn't mean literally you have to take the clothes off each time. No, they said don't wear the climb, and he put it on. Then he took it off, and he put it on. Does he have to actually take it off and put it on each time? Or just enough to he put his hand in the sleeve, that's good enough. In other words, he took his hand out of the sleeve, put it on the sleeve. And this is not actually taking it off and putting it on, taking it off. Even it only took the time, it was the time they told him to wear, he's wearing the climb, he's over once. Then they warned him again. and he kept it on. If it stayed, he had enough time to take it off and put it on. That's also chayav for that too. You don't have to literally take it on, take it off each time. So we said the last part of the Mishnah was that you'd be chayav 8 malchuses for 8 different isurim if you did it in this manner. Rav Yanai, the rabbis had a chabura, a group of rabbis got together. Yanai, we'll see many times he was like Rabbi Yochanan's Rebbe, and they took a vote and they said, "Hachofa b'klaim loka." If you just cover up with klayim, even if you don't actually plant the fields, if you just there's seeds there and you cover up the dirt on top of the seeds, you get malchus for that. That's like planting. That's like zoreah. Rabbi Yochanan said to Rabbi Yochanan, who was a student of Rabbi Yanai, said, Rabbi Yochanan said, well, isn't that in our Mishnah? That's what you see in our Mishnah. Why? Lab Mishnah saying, isn't that what we learn in our Mishnah? Our Mishnah says, yesh chorish tlem. Sometimes you can plow 1 furrow, v'chayev lo mishum shmona lavan, and you chayev 8 malchuses, 8 lavan, 8 times you get malchus. One is the hachorish b'shor b'chamor, as we said. Chorish b'shor b'chamor, that's for klai behema, right? By not klai behema of mixed breeding, but for plowing together with 2 different species. Behem mukdashim, as we said, the b'chor shor is the first one is b'chor shor, that's losav b'chor shorecha, and the second one is for being moel behektish and the chamor. Uklai kerem and klaikim, now klai bekerem. Now high chorish the machayim mishum klayim hechem mishkachasla. You're plowing here. You're not planting. Plowing is one process, one procedure. Planting is another. So how do you say over here, when you plow, you're over for klayim for planting klaya kerem? How are you over for klaya kerem? High chorish machayim mishum klayim hechem mishkachasla. Lav the michsibedei behadei does. It means that he's covering up the dirt as you're plowing. You're covering up some seeds that were already there. So it shows you that covering up the seeds is the equivalent of plowing. Amalei Rav Yanai said, yeah, big deal. Had I not lifted up the shard for you, would you have seen the pearl underneath it? Meaning, what do you think I was referring to? Yeah, I told you that if you cover, I told you the halacha, that if you cover up 2 different seeds, or if you learn if you learn that you need 3 seeds over here, two seeds of grains and 1 of wine, of vines, grapes. Whatever you covered up, though, I told you just covering it up, you get malchus for that. Had I not told you that, would you have understood that our Mishnah refers to that case? And it was like an example saying, had I not lifted up the shard for you, would you have known that the pearl was underneath it? It's like an example. I indicated it to you. Amalei Rish Lakish, his brother-in-law said to Rabbi Yochanan, but the fact is, even though he said to you, of course I hinted at, but he explained, but he did say, yeah, that's what the Mishnah means. The Mishnah means, but I told you, I enlightened you that that's a pshat in the Mishnah. But he did praise him that yes, that's a pshat in the Mishnah. He gave him a jab, I hinted it to you, but yes, that's a pshat in the Mishnah. Ilav de kosach gava rabba. If this great man Rav Yanai had not praised you, meaning by saying, yes, you're correct, your deduction from the Mishnah is correct, that goes in accordance with what I explained to you, that just covering up the climb is like equivalent to planting it, having a minna, I would have thought that the Mishnah goes like Rebbe Kiva, Masti Samani Rebbe Kiva, the Omer Hamakayim Klein Loka. I would think that that's not considered planting. In other words, Rav Yanai's chiddush is, and that's Rabbi Yochanan says the proof of that from the Mishnah, that he says you're plowing your chai for klai kerem. That means that just covering up seeds is enough for considered planting. Had it not been that was his deduction from the Mishnah, or that he said that halacha which we deduce from the Mishnah, I would have said, Rish Lakish says, I would have said the Mishnah goes like Rebbe Kiva, who says that simply preserving klayim, makayim, maintaining the klayim, you get malchus for that. That's good. I would have said that's true, but now that he said that that's considered planting, that you're covering up is like planting. All right, so that's a bigger chiddush. My Rebbe Kiva, where do you have Rebbe Kiva's halacha? The Tanya, hamenachesh v'machapa b'klayim. If you're weeding, you're taking out the bad stuff, or you cover it up with klayim, loka. Although you get malchus, Rebbe Kiva Omer afamakayim. In other words, the Mishnah says, "What if you're weeding or you're covering up with klayim, you get malchus." Rebbe Kiva says, "No, even if you just preserve it, you didn't cover it up, and that's what the Mishnah means too. Maybe you just preserving it by applying. You're preserving it." My time, what's his reason? The Tanya pasuk says, "Lo satcha lo sisra klayim, ainli zoreya." That's if you plant it. Makayim, and how do I know even preserving or maintaining the climb? You're also chayav that. Tamalomar Pasuk says behem lo sarbiya climb sadcha lo sisra climb, but it says the way it says it is climb sadcha lo. In other words, he could have said it differently, but he says behem lo sarbiya climb sadcha lo sisra climb. He could have said it in a different way, lo sarbiya behem climb, but it says behem lo sarbiya, but he uses the word climb next to sadcha, right? Rashi points out that he could have said it. Climb, climb. The climb. Rashi about 8 lines from the bottom of the page. I couldn't partially quote. He could have said, climb lo sarbiya. Your animals with climb, you shouldn't be sarbiya. But since he put the word climb, the climb going on behemtcha, but it's right next to the word sadcha, tells you that what? That don't have any climb in your field. Meaning, even if you maintain it, you preserve it, you're high for that too. Amalei ula. Here's another one. If you're claiming what? That by the climb, the fourth avera that you're over here, when you plow the furrow and you're over all these different things, and the fourth one was climb, and you said it's on yontif, so you're high for planting on yontif. So why don't you say also you're high mishma zareya b'yontif? Why do you say you're only high for plowing on yontif, right? You just said that machapa is covering it up. So why do you say you're chayav for plowing on yontif? Plowing is one of the 39 malachas, right? Why do you say you're chayav for plowing? You're also planting. If you're saying covering up, is that you're chayav for planting? Amalei tana v'shari. Okay, he left one out. Amalei tana katani shmona. He said specifically 8. As if he's telling you there's 8, no more. He's trying to show you it's possible to plow a furrow and you're chayav 8 times. He's telling you 8. And you say you're leaving it out. You left out one. He said 8. 8 is dafka. Rabba, so Rabba learns like that. No. You know, on Shabbos, if let's say you forgot it was Shabbos, all right? No, you didn't forget Shabbos. You forgot there were 39 malachas on Shabbos, and you did all 39. You're chayav 39. You have to bring 39 chatos there, right? There's chilik malachas there. If you did different malachas on Shabbos, you're chayav each and every one. Not on yontif. Not on yontif. Why? Because how do we know? Rashi says 2 reasons. If you learn that what? When it says lo svar reish b'chol mashva sechem b'yom Shabbos, maybe why did it say havara of all 39? Why did it only mention that one? To tell you that havara is lechalek, that tell you that you're chayav at each and every one. And even if you hold that havara is lelav yatzis, so you learn out chilik malachas from what v'asa achas mikol mitzvahs achas 1. That's only by chatos. But on yontif you're not chayav chatos. On yontif, if you're over one of the mitzvahs, one of the 39 malachas, if you're over one of the 39 malachas on yontif, if you did it b'mezid, you're chayiv malchus. You're chayiv malchus. It's not misa, and there's no chatos over there. So he says, Amar Rabba, yesh chilik malchus b'shal on Shabbos, you're chayiv in each and one, and chilik malchus b'yontif. You already said you're chayiv for plowing on yontif. You're chayiv for plowing on yontif. You're chayiv once with it. Even if you did other malchus, you're only chayiv on yontif once. Amalei adotate. So it should be. You're right. But Eisvei Abaya, he says, v'ein chilik malchus b'yontif. You're telling me that on yontif, if you did more than one of the 39 malachas, you're not chayiv for each and every one. Is that really the case? So that now we're going to try to prove otherwise. Rashi says though 5 lines from down in Rashi, you did 2 malachas and you're only chayiv only one. And that's over, like I said, either because havara yatzis and havara is not also on yontif. You're allowed to light a fire on yontif, right? Right, and then he goes on. This Shabbos. It's on chorus. She goes on chatas. The behi parsha is speaking about chatas. Now the yontif the chiv malchus veins on a chorus. Vein b'chilik malchus. There's no chilik malchus there. So the answer is that if you did 2 isurim on yontif, you only chayiv 1. Okay, that's how you don't have a 9th one there. But now we have a kasha eisvei abai in the Gemara, 3 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. Vein chilik malachos b'yontif. He's really saying there's no separate malachos on yontif. By the time we learn. Hamavasho gid hanosha, get a nosha, the sciatic nerve. If you cook that in chalav, now that's really meat. It's a sciatic nerve, but it's really meat. If you cook it in milk, be on yontif, va'achlo, and you ate it, loka chamesh, you get 5 malchus. 5 malchus. What are you chai for? Loka mishum ochel gid. Number 1, you're allowed to get a nosha. That's 1 malchus. But loka mishum avashel b'yontif. Number 2, chai yontif. Now the get a nosha has nothing to do with yontif. You're chayiv for eating get a nosha any time of the year, right? Any day of the year. But if you cooked it in milk on yontif, you're chayiv 5 malchus. 1 for eating get a nosha, 1 for cooking on yontif shalol l'tzorach, because you can't eat it. You're not supposed to eat it, so that's cooking shalol l'tzorach. Even though we say you're allowed to cook on yontif, right? That's only l'tzorach. But lokum mishum avashel gid b'cholav. Remember, is Isser to cook meat and milk together. Remember, by is what there's 3 Isurim, right? You can't cook it, you can't have enough from it, you can't eat it. So number 1, he's chayiv for eating it. You're chayiv for eating the gid. You're chayiv for cooking meat and milk together. And you're chayiv for eating basar b'chalav. You're mavashal basar b'chalav and eating and for eating basar b'chalav. And you're chayiv for what? For lighting the fire. What do you mean you're chayiv? What are the 2 things related to Yontif? Eating gid anasha and eating and cooking basar b'chalav, that's nothing to do with Yontif, right? That's basar b'chalav, right? But there's 2 Isurim here. You're over for cooking on Yontif and for lighting a fire. So those are 2 Isurim. And the v'misa mishum avara lo l'chayiv, you shouldn't be chayiv for avara. The chayiv mishum shubal, you're already chayiv for cooking on Yontif. So how can you be chayiv for lighting lighting a fire on Yontif? You just said for Yontif you only chayiv 1. Even though you did many Yisurim, you only chayiv 1 malchus. It says apek havara, to take out havara of ayil gid anasha. Okay, so nevela. You know what? The gid anasha was not of a kosher animal that was shechted properly, but you can't gasha. Is you're a chayiv also for nevela there? So you chayiv for. So there's 3 things that you're chayiv for eating. 1 for eating the gid, 1 for eating what basar b'chalav, and 1 for eating nevela. Tani Shiur said lo kashtayim al chilaso. Of the 5, 2 are for eating, v'shalosh shall be shulo. And according to the Misa, shalosh al chilaso. If you're saying that you're chai for eating nevela, so you're chai for eating gid, you're chai for eating nevela, and you're chai for eating basar b'chalav. There's 3 Yisurim there. Chayva el apik havara v'ayil atzei ashera. Take out havara for right. Havara is right. It's not, you're not chayiv for kindling. You're chayiv for cooking with atzei ashera, with idol wood. If you're talking about if you used a wood from an idol like a seira tree, also for bringing an abomination into your house. If you're using an abomination, if you're talking about there, you should be chayiv for not only cooking with that, but you should also be using it, but also you should bring it into your house. There's another Yisur there too. You cooked it with atzei hegdish. What's the lav? Burn down the idols. Hashem, you should burn up. You shouldn't burn hegdish. So that's the 5th one. So the truth is, you're right. You only chayiv 1 for Yontif. The other ones are for what? The other ones are for cooking meat and milk together, right? Eating meat and milk together, eating the get anasha, right? Cooking on Yontif. And the 5th one is for cooking with atzei hegdish. All right, we'll pick them here tomorrow. Mitzvah Hashem. Have a good day, everybody. Chodesh Tov.